In the reading corner today, I'm very excited to be welcoming Garry Parsons, a children's book illustrator with oodles of books to his credit, so many that I can't name them all. But they do include the much-loved Billy's Bucket, written by Kes Gray, and the Dinosaur That Pooped series, written by Tom Fletcher and Dougie Poynter, and also his own picture book, Krong, which was a particular favourite of mine. He's also worked extensively with black and white line illustration for series like George's Secret Key to the Universe, written by Lucy Hawking, and the Dragon Sitter series with Josh Lacey. I've seen Garry in action in schools and working with student teachers, and if we were in the Wild West, I think he would be called Quick Draw Parsons. So today, I'd like to welcome Garry Parsons to the Reading Corner.
Thank you. Hi, Nikki. Hi.
Nice to have you here. And today we're mainly going to be talking about two of your most recent books, one coming out very soon, and the other, because we're recording in May 2020, we know that the particular circumstances at the moment has upset publishing schedules a little bit, and a book that was due to come out is now coming out next year, but we're going to talk a little bit about that, and that one is called My Daddies. So just to begin, Garry, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your career in children's book illustration, and particularly whether it was an early career choice.
I always wanted to draw ever since I was very young, and my dad used to draw things for me and I used to copy his drawings until I think I got a bit better than him. So I always knew that I wanted to draw, but I thought I was going to be a painter, so I studied painting at Canterbury Art College quite a number of years ago now, and when my painting career didn't really take off in a way that I had hoped it would. Oh, actually, I had a bit of a epiphany at the degree show when I had all my paintings up in one space, and I realized that the subject matter and the sequence that I was working on was like a giant picture book. So with that in mind, a couple of years later, I went back to University of Brighton and I studied sequential design with John Vernon Lord and George Hardy, and that kind of changed the direction of my creativity, I suppose, towards books.
So you were certainly there learning with one of the greats. So John Vernon Lord, for any listeners that don't know, he was the creator of the giant jam sandwich.
The giant jam sandwich, indeed, which was, amazing for me because it was one of my favourite books as a child. I had that book. And then to go and have him as my personal tutor for 2 years while I did this part-time course was really incredible. And he was used to, I love that he was used to go, Garry, make sure your fingers don't look like a bunch of sausages. So, I'm always very conscious of my fingers. Whenever I draw hands, I always think of John Vernon.
Great to actually be taught by somebody that's been an inspiration early on. We're going to talk today about, and I'm going to get this wrong at some point in the interview because it's a real tongue twister, but we're going to be talking about your forthcoming book, which is Llama Glamarama,
That's right.
Written by Simon James Green. Tell us a bit about the story, first of all.
Larry is a llama and he lives on a very kind of well-to-do, conservative, shall we say, farm. I've kind of set it in my imagination, it was kind of slightly in Tuscany, somewhere like that. Anyway, they have a whole load of rules that they need to follow, keeping quiet and being careful on the stairs and things like that. But Larry, in his room, when he closes the door, he has this big secret, which happens at night. That's the only time he can express it. And he's very conscious about what the others are going to think about this secret that he has. I can tell you that he loves to dance, and he's a move-in, groove-in kind of, he does a bit of hip-hop, he does a bit of techno, anything. And he goes on this little journey, and he discovers himself, and there's this wonderful revelation at the end from his friends, who have their own little secrets and things that they reveal at the end too. It's funny, and it's light. It has a lovely and quite a powerful message about being yourself. And I think Simon's written this so beautifully. It's very unforceful and very sweet. Yeah.
Mm. So you're given this text, and as an illustrator, how did you want to support and add to the storytelling of a text that you've told us you kind of already really appreciated? What did you want to bring to it?
From my own personal experience of life, I found this, I knew that I could contribute to this book considerably, in a way like, you're kind of holding on to parts of your personality that you don't feel like you can reveal to anybody just yet. So it's got that kind of, I wanted to give it that kind of tension, which I think it does have, all told with humour and lightness. So
that's a sort of characteristic of your work in many ways. Not necessarily laugh out loud humour, but it's something that I do think about, that kind of lightness when I think about your work, lightness of touch. How important is humour to you?
Very important. I suppose I would never say that I was kind of comedic in any way, but I do have a wit, and I do like those kind of subtleties. So it's interesting you said that my work has this kind of subtle humour to it, because I think that's very who I am. And I like those funny kind of things that you can do with eyes and just a little touch of bending a line here and there to give a character more nuanced facial expression, which can bring some humour to a picture.
So if we have a look at Llama Glamarama,
yes,
and think about it as how illustration supports the storytelling and the pacing of the story, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what's very interesting visually about this book for me was that it really does roll through his feelings of being a bit repressed to joyous, almost page turn by page turn. So we see him while he's being rigid in the structure of the llama farm, and then we get this reveal of what he's doing in his bedroom at night, doing his dancing, putting his stereo on. So you can it's great to be able to play with colour in that way and use dark, muted kind of turquoises for the more serious spreads. And then when he's really going to town and is dancing, we can really let rip with the colour. So he has this wonderful rainbow feather boa which he flings around when he's dancing. So it goes up and down through that. And there's lots of deep shadows in this book where his friends are accusing him, and they have a torch which emphasises that whole thing, which is nice to play with. And then of course when he leaves the farm at one point to go in search of himself, and it's raining, it's very miserable, the trees are empty of leaves, and he's just really kind of sorrowful and looking at his own sad reflection in some water, which, for me, it's great to be able to push and pull the book visually like this.
The use of the torch is brilliant. There's one spread that I'm looking at now which has got the three friends on it, and one is holding the torch in front. There's a beam of light, but you can see their bodies through the light, and just how you've shown that, which I guess when we're reading it we take it for granted, but that's obviously a choice that you have to make about how to show that.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun, those kind of, working out how you're going to do that. I really like those little challenges. And because I paint as well, when I look at that spread now, I can see where I've added, I use some tape just to make sure that the line of the beam of the torchlight is straight.
So it's actually painted rather than being created digitally.
It is. I'm like a dinosaur of the illustration world, that I still paint. And I just love the whole texture and mixing of paints. I like the texture, and I like the fact that you can see that it's been hand rendered. I don't have anything against using a computer because I do that too. But for picture books, I really like the painting.
Just having a look at another spread. I love the contrasts in this book as well. Again, the colour is a big part of that, but also the scaling and the size of it. And I'm looking at the picture that you talked about where Larry is looking very sad here. He's in the forest. It's raining. He's looking in a pool. Tell us a little bit about the composition of that picture.
I think I just wanted it to be kind of barren and bleak. And yeah, I think I managed to achieve that.
Oh, you definitely did. I mean, those trees are almost prison-like, aren't they? And there's streaks of rain coming down, making us all, that kind of pathetic fallacy idea, making us all feel rather sad and gloomy.
Yeah. I mean, I really love that about picture books. And I know I've had a career on kind of humour and silly, but I still really enjoy being able to change how you might feel when you're reading a book. That's the part that I really love about picture books. You can create kind of empathy with the reader. So all my favourite illustrators, I feel, are really brilliant at doing that, like Emma Chichester Clark and Raymond Briggs, and those kind of people I look back to for inspiration on those to create emotion. I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
I wonder if we could have a think about characters for a moment, because you've told us it's about a farm full of llamas. Obviously, Larry is the main character, but he's got 3 friends here. And you've got to make them all different. The majority of llamas all look the same. So how did you come up with your characters?
So one of them is called Spitz, and he is, I suppose they need to have, one's kind of got floppy hair to one side and one's got curlier, kind of more matted hair. I spent a lot of time looking at llamas online, and what I tend to do these days is with a book is make up a board on Pinterest, and so I just spend a couple of days looking for images. And I did go and visit a couple of llamas, and they are the most peculiar animals, quite adorable but very strange, really odd feet as well. So I wanted to get some of that kind of quirkiness in these characters, and one of them is called Patch. So he has a funny eye patch part to him. His patch was going to be like a Ziggy Stardust lightning bolt, but I was talked out of doing that.
Oh, was that a homage to David Bowie then?
A little homage to David Bowie. I thought this book is about music and being out there and a little bit different. So I thought that would have been nice, but we didn't get that far.
Oh, there'd have been lots of parents that would appreciate. I
do love jokes for parents, and there are a couple of those in the Llama Glamarama as well.
So let's think a little bit about your other forthcoming book, because there are some connections here. It's very much about being true to yourself and about inclusivity and diverse families. And your next book is called My Daddies. So can you tell us a little bit about that story?
It's like a homage to parenthood, and particularly adopted parents and same-sex. So it's a same-sex couple book about 2 dads and their daughter and their dog. And they have a very kind of quiet adventure through books and reading that explains their day and how they are together. And basically, it's a book about love, and it's a book about, it doesn't matter who you are, everybody can parent a child. And this is, as a gay man myself, me and my partner, we have adopted 2 children. So this is very close and dear to my heart, this book.
It's absolutely beautiful what I've seen. I have only been able to see a few spreads of it, but as you say, it's about great parenting. It's also about the imagination, because a lot of that play is imaginative, isn't it? Does that kind of reflect your experience at home, particularly when your children were younger?
definitely. I mean, I think what's really lovely about this book is it's like a day in their life. So they're playing around with their daughter and reading various books, and this takes them on different travels. So just that aspect gives me visually a chance to take them into different worlds. So they're in a kind of fairy tale battle with dragons, and then the next page they're in the land of dinosaurs, and they go to space. So visually it was really brilliant to work on for me. But I love this book because I like the idea of bringing emotion into the work, and I hope that this has got some of me in it, because I've lived this experience of adopting children, as has the author Gareth Peter. He also has 2 children, so we had a lot in common. There's one spread that I think we both are very fond of, which is a life story book. And if anybody has adopted children, this is very important through adoptions. It's basically talking about all the amazing networks that you might have, that the child might have, so grandparents, and letting them know where they came from, and there's no secrets, and it's like a little joyous little book of their life so far. I don't know if you've seen that one, Nikki, but that's definitely both Gareth and my favourite spread from this book, I think.
Oh, that's great. Actually, I don't think that was on the sample that I saw, which is a shame, but I will look out for it as soon as I can, because that sounds really important. And there still aren't enough books with adopted children and adopted families. And I realised this when we were selecting books for a project that we run at Just Imagine. And we had 2 books, both that had adopted children in them. And it wasn't until we were partway through the project that we realised how negative the portrayal was of the adopted family. It was almost like the evil step family. You know, it was that kind of image of adoption rather than it being a warm, normal, accepted family. So it did give us pause to stop for thought. And has that been your experience as you've tried to find books for your own children?
Yes, well, I mean, when my partner and I were going through the adoption process, which is, you know, very, very long and in depth and all of that, and you get lots of advice about how to deal with this big change that's coming in your life. And we were offered some books about adoption. I just found them all rather gloomy, and they weren't very brilliantly written, or the illustrations are a bit sad or something like that. There is definitely space for a new book, and I really hope that this My Daddies is able to do that, because it's a joy, this book. It's a celebration of parenting.
I want to ask you a question about the title of the book. And it's whether or not, by calling the title My Daddies and by making it explicit, are you making it exceptional rather than part of the norm, I guess? What do you think?
I think it's an interesting question. I like that it's very direct. So if this was sitting in a pile of books in a bookshop, I think that would be wonderful, that it could just sit there with other books, and it's not exceptionally, it's just a story about My Daddies. That is the aim that we had. We certainly didn't want to make it kind of exclusive in any way, but we will see what happens and how it's received.
Coming back to bringing up the children and the kind of play element within the story, which is gorgeous. What ways did you encourage your children to take up pencils, crayons, or whatever and draw?
Oh, I can't help myself but be kind of encouraging with paper and pencils. I'm always saying, what should we do? Shall we do some drawing? But because I work from home, and I have the 2 desks that I draw and work at. So they both have chairs that they can sit on the other side. But what they do have is, sometimes when I go to schools, I have to really encourage children that it's okay, just do what you know, to make marks and make a mess. Both my kids, I think, because they just absorb that I just draw they have no inhibitions about getting started. So if they have a piece of paper, they can just get on and go for it. If it doesn't work, they're not worried. I mean, that's half the battle, I think, certainly with drawing, is just having the confidence just to give it a crack.
I've noticed in school, though, sometimes that inhibition creeps in when children start to become conscious of what their drawing looks like. So how were you able to get over that?
I've had quite a few years of doing events in schools now, and I think that I've managed to find a way of enthusing them and encouraging them by them watching me draw. So I do some drawing and I just make it up as I go along, and it's funny, and literally I put in their suggestions and we just draw, and if it doesn't work out, we just laugh about it, and we end up with a few sheets of paper with drawings on very, very quickly. So I think once they see someone doing that, most of the time the kids can just go for it. And if any child is just holding a pencil shaking with fear about what's going to happen, then I can help out, and I will often draw on there for them, and then they will just carry it on. I think they just need a little bit of encouragement and just an excuse to say, just, it really doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be perfect.
From watching your children or children in school draw, have you learnt anything about children's artwork?
I definitely have. I think children's imagination can just go, you just need a little bit of a fuse for them to go off on. At the end of sessions in schools, I quite often have to get my camera out and take pictures of their work, because each person's creativity comes from some different place, and there's so much uniqueness in a person's hand when they're drawing. I don't know how it might influence what I do day to day, but certainly I'm always so excited and enthused when I've been working in a school with kids.
I'm really interested in what you just said about the uniqueness in someone's hand. Yeah. I just wonder whether when we look at a drawing, that's the thing that they're tuned into. I find that really fascinating. What kind of qualities does that bring out, this kind of uniqueness in the hand?
I have a really good example of that. For a while I taught on a art course for beginners, and it was great because it was literally showing people how they might hold a pencil better and what marks that they can produce. And there was one man who would paint, I'd set up a still life, and there's one man who would just throw everything he had to it. So in a few minutes he would have a yellow background blocked in, and his bottles were all wonky, but they were wonderfully wonky, and it was all about him. So it really was that his individual creativity was coming up, but he couldn't see it. He would just say, oh no, I think I'm going to discard this one and put it in the bin on the way out. And actually I was desperate to take them home and put them on my wall. They were wonderful. So whether people can see their own unique talent is another matter. And that's really hard to convince people that they have something to offer through drawing, definitely.
That's so interesting, and I'm finding it quite moving what you've just said. I remember my grandmother, after my granddad died, took up art classes just at a community centre. And I remember her coming home with all of her work and pottery. She became very interested in pottery. And I saw a completely different facet to her personality through these things that she was creating. And they were unique, and they might not have been polished, but they were amazing.
Definitely, it is. It's like seeing another aspect of people. But if you're trained, or you can go to college and you can, that's what you're working on. So you get that level of confidence to keep your work moving on. I mean, I a long time ago, when I was just beginning my career, there was one of those, I think it was Society of Illustrators. Somebody had one of those big bumper annuals that you would have work in, where prospective art directors would be able to see your work. And my page was next to David Roberts. And I found this page a few weeks ago, and you could see this emerging talent of David Roberts, but it was quite unrefined, but it was all there. And then when you think about the wonderful work that he's been doing recently, my son and I have both been enjoying his suffragettes book. Oh, and the drawing is just marvelous. So it's a little bit like that. I think if everybody has something to offer when they pick up a pencil.
So we've moved quite some way from Glamarama and My Daddies, and we've got a little bit deep there. But I do want to draw attention for our listeners back to those two books, and to thank you so much for creating them. Not only are they joyously illustrated, but they are important in the stories that they tell and the stories that we need to get out there for our young readers. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Garry. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nikki. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to In the Reading Corner with Just Imagine. If you have enjoyed this podcast, you can find many more on the podcast section of our website, justimagine.co.uk, plus via iTunes or SoundCloud or your usual podcast provider. Don't forget to pass the pod and recommend this fantastic free resource to your friends and colleagues.